Well, welcome everybody. This is our Go Blue Med Twitter chat. It's a bunch of University of Michigan medical students answering questions from prospective students. So we're excited to be here. I guess the format is we've been kind of given a lot of questions. We've condensed them down as best we can, and we're going to be taking some live questions as well. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jonathan. I'm from El Paso, Texas. I'm in the MD-PhD program here at the University of Michigan, and I'm in my third year of graduate school. So an M3, G3 is what I'm technically classified as.
I'm Sam. I'm an M4. I'm from Skokie, Illinois, and I went to Carleton College for undergrad where I did an English and chemistry double major.
I'm Des. I'm a third year, well, just finished up my second year, starting third year. I'm from New Boston, Michigan, so downriver area, and I went to the University of Michigan for undergrad.
I'm Asil. I'm an M1. I'm from Dearborn, Michigan, and I went to U of M for undergrad and took a gap year after.
I'm Kevin. I'm an M2 from Ann Arbor originally, but went to college out in Massachusetts at Williams College. I'm excited to be here today.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to get started with our first question, and that is, what's one cool thing you did in the past week? I'll start, if that's okay, just because I'll answer a few questions along with everybody else. I actually took a motorcycle safety class this past weekend, so I learned how to ride a motorcycle with another MD-PhD student. It was a lot of fun. We interfaced with a lot of different people in the Ann Arbor community, so it was really cool, and it was something different outside of our normal worlds.
I am one of 4 people who are in charge of a musical that we do every year here called The Smoker. And this past Monday, we got a group of people together and we talked through kind of the plot of the musical because we write it and produce the whole thing.
So I just finished my last day of clerkship, my rotations yesterday.
Congrats.
Thanks. And to finish it, the team that I was working with allowed me to do a bedside procedure on my patient. So that was really cool, and that was fun.
So this week's been pretty busy school-wise. We've been busy with anatomy. We've got a quiz, but I think something that was really fun was my friends and I managed to spontaneously have a game night on Sunday. So 8 of us got together super late after a long day of studying and just played cards, had fun, laughed a lot. So it was a really fun time.
Yeah. So all the M2s are actually going to start their clinical rotations on Monday. So we're in a period of our curriculum called Transition to Clerkships. And so as a part of that curriculum, we had a procedures day where we learned how to do IVs and draw blood and do some ultrasound guided procedures. That was a pretty cool thing we did this week too.
Awesome. Cool. All right, so we've got a question kind of related to admissions, and that is, what factors in your application do you think most contributed to your acceptance at Michigan? Any specific activities or extracurriculars, and also what month did you apply? So I'll let you all go ahead, whoever wants to go first.
I'm pretty fresh out of the process, so I feel like I can talk about this. You said the first part was what aspect of my application helped me get in, I think.
Yeah, what factors in your application helped you?
I don't think there's a specific formula of activities or numbers to have, but I think the fact that my application reflected things that I was passionate about, so diverse activities that I cared about, whatever they may be for you and whatever they were for me, I think because I cared a lot about them and could go on and on about my clinical experiences or my volunteering or my major, that served me really well. So that's something I would recommend for people who are applying. Make sure the things that you're doing you're really passionate about. And the second part of that question.
So any specific activities or extracurriculars, and then what month did you apply?
Yeah, so I submitted my primary in June, first week of June, and my secondaries throughout the month of July. I highly recommend soon. The sooner the better, definitely. And like I said, there's no that's not to say that if you submit it in August, oh, that's it, but sooner is always better. And I think my extracurriculars that I think really helped me stand out was my clinical experience. So like I said, I took a gap year after undergrad, and I had a whole year of experience in the hospital, and I think because it's so hard to get that experience in undergrad, if you take some time off, definitely look for maybe a scribing job or a medical assistant, anything where you can really interact with patients, because it's a very unique experience that I think is helping me now as a med student.
Great. Thanks, Cecile.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah.
So I guess one thing that kind of stuck out in my application is I was a student athlete in college. So I was on the football team all through undergrad. And I think as a student athlete, it really kind of translates to medicine well as being part of a team, understanding how to interact with a whole bunch of different diverse teammates and knowing your role within a team. So I think that was one thing that kind of stuck out in my application. And as far as what month, I was a little bit later in applying. There were a couple of extraneous things outside of the application process that happened during my life during that point, but things that I kind of talked about during my personal statement and during my interviews. So I think I sent my primaries in July and had all of my secondaries in by August. So a little bit later, but definitely all of the advice that I've heard is also as early as possible to get those in, the better.
Yeah. Cool. We can move on to the next question, I think. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
So this question, next question is, what would you consider to be the greatest strengths of Michigan's curriculum? And is there anything you would change? How receptive are faculty and administration to student feedback? So strengths of our curriculum.
So I will say, as a student who just finished like the clerkship year, getting the exposure to patients and just working with patients earlier has been really beneficial, because I've always kind of been like a hands-on learner, and just being able to work with patients as opposed to sitting in a classroom for 2 years straight was one big thing for me. And I think that that's kind of helped me solidify a lot of the information, as well as just like learn it, because like on the move you're kind of learning, you're forced to learn it actually. And that's kind of helped me overall, and I think I've appreciated that a lot more as opposed to just starting my clerkship year as a third year. But because of that also, there's a lot of, the faculty and everyone's very receptive to feedback that the students give, just because we're kind of in this like transition period, or we were in this transition period when I was going through it. So they were like very open, very receptive to all of our feedback, and they were kind of very flexible with just like things that the students' needs kind of became like the administration's needs, and we were able to work together throughout the year, so that was really great.
I think as a fourth year, I am a branch student, and even people in the medical school kind of struggle with knowing what that means, but I'm here to tell you that I know what the branches are and I can explain them. So our curriculum is, the analogy that we use is that it's like a tree. So the first couple years are the trunks. You have the preclinical, the scientific trunk, and then the clinical trunk, and then third and fourth year are the branches. And so what is really nice about Michigan's curriculum is that your third and fourth year is all elective time, whereas other schools, only your fourth year is elective time. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to do a lot of really cool things and research that you are interested in. So for example, I am doing a clinical ethics fellowship right now that is like 7 months long, where I get to work on the our institutional ethics consultation service, and I don't have to delay graduation in order to do this. And that's not an opportunity that I would have had at any other school.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next question. This is specifically for you, Asil. So, because you are a first-year student,
Yeah.
How have your first weeks lined up with your expectations, and how have they been different? And then I'll ask you the second question in a second.
Okay, so how have they been the same and how have they been different?
Yeah, your expectations of coming in the first weeks of school here.
I would say they've been mostly different, but not in like a total 180 way, but maybe the extent of like what I was, or the magnitude of what I was expecting. So let me give you an example. I know most of us know med school is rigorous. It's a lot of information, and you spend a lot of time studying. But you don't really know how much or what it's like until you're actually in it. And you know, that was tough. I'm 7 weeks in. It's still tough, but every day does get easier. But that being said, I think, you know, the feeling I get when I finish a really hard quiz, or you know, walk out of anatomy lab, or just have done something really tough that, you know, I've never really done before, is so rewarding, and it's a rewarding feeling that I didn't know I could feel to this extent. So, you know, it goes both ways. It's tough, but it's rewarding. And something else that I didn't really understand before coming in, I knew that like family is important and having a good support system and friends are important, but I think the people that I've met in my class and the friends that I've made are more amazing than I ever, like, this is so cheesy, but it's so true. Like when you're, you know, really struggling through material, or just like really tired and you know you have really good friends you can count on in your class, it's a really great feeling, and I'm very grateful for it here. And I didn't know that, you know, I'd meet such great people here. So I'm very grateful for that. And
Cool.
yeah, I hope that answers the
So
question.
that's a really nice segue. The second part of the question is, what has been your best strategy for self-care during this time? So it sounds like the social support from your friends has been really important. What else have you felt like, have you built in self-care?
Self-care. So I learned a lot of good self-care in my gap year. Highly recommend taking that time off. But I think ways I incorporate self-care is kind of making it a priority. So, you know, we're really busy sometimes through required events, studying, if it's a quiz weekend or whatever, but making sure the same way you schedule in studying, you schedule in an hour of, I'm gonna watch 3 episodes of The Office, or I'm gonna call my friend who's in dental school in another state, or I'm gonna, you know, go for a walk outside, go to the ARB. You have to tell yourself that this is what I'm gonna do, and even if you're like, oh, you know, I'm too behind for this, you're not, because you're gonna do that hour of self-care and you're gonna feel really much better when you come back and sit down to keep studying. So making it a priority, kind of, you know, before you start school, think about the things that make you feel at ease, the things that make you happy, and really try to keep that a part of your life, even if it's just an hour a day. It's really not that much.
That's awesome. And I think that, and you all may have some feedback for this, but I think that our administration and the kind of gestalt of the med school is always concerned about how you're doing as a person in self-care. At least that's always been present for me as I've gone through. So it's nice to know that people are thinking about that, and that's an important thing for us. Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question has to do with Ann Arbor, A2. So for those moving from a big city to Ann Arbor, how was your transition? And the second part of the question is, what do you all do outside of school? So anybody move from a big city to Ann Arbor?
Kind of.
So
I'm from Ann Arbor originally, but I did a gap year in Philadelphia.
Okay, cool.
So Ann Arbor has always kind of been home, so it's a little bit different of an answer for me, but I think one of the things I love most about Ann Arbor is that it's a small town, college town feel, but there's everything you want in a town. So like the Main Street has incredible restaurants, some really cool bars and places to go. The ARB is a huge park kind of like in the middle of the city right next to the hospital. So having a weekend free or even like a night to go walk through the ARB kind of right next to the Huron River is always a great thing.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite things is going to the farmers market on Saturday mornings. They have like these incredible samples and different local farmers come and bring all their like crops or eggs or cheeses or all of the above that's kind of there.
Which is really a short walk for most we live.
Right, it's probably a 5-minute walk from like the medical school.
So it's really easy to get to.
So it's like, it's a little town where people know a lot of other people, and it's really familiar. You can run into people on the street that you know from in my case, from childhood. But it's also big enough that like you never feel kind of contained by it too.
What are y'all doing in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, I feel like Kevin described a lot of like the big key features of Ann Arbor that I love. I love living here. I did not come from a big city. I went to school in Northfield, Minnesota, which is like this tiny little town, 20,000 people. But in terms of like things that I do, so I have a goal to eat at every restaurant worth eating at in Ann Arbor before I graduate. So that's the first thing. So like I have a lot of recommendations if you need them. I've tried my hardest to eat at all the really good places.
Have you done Restaurant Week, by the way?
I have done Restaurant Week. Yeah,
cool.
So Restaurant Week. So Ann Arbor does Restaurant Week like twice a year. There's one in the summer and one in the winter. And all of the nice restaurants in Ann Arbor will do like a discounted meal, so you can go in and try their food for a little less money. So I like doing that a lot. There are a lot of different ways to work out in Ann Arbor. So I do yoga and Pure Barre. There's so many different yoga studios that are awesome. I love Tiny Buddha. It's like my favorite place to be. I know a lot of people who do CrossFit and also Orange Theory. A lot of residents and faculty do Orange Theory too. And then the other thing that I love is I love the Huron River. Like Ann Arbor is this place where you have access to kind of more metropolitan things like stores and restaurants and all of that stuff, but you also have this like magnificent river and the ARB and also state parks that are nearby in neighboring cities. And like I went kayaking on the Huron River this past Saturday, and that's one of my favorite things to do. I saw like 7 turtles, which was like incredible. But I really, really love Ann Arbor, and it's got a lot going for it.
Yeah, it's a very active town, and
Yeah.
you see lots of people spending time outside, especially when the weather gets good.
Yeah. And the other thing, I think we'd be remiss without mentioning game day in Ann
Right.
Arbor, too.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh my God.
So we have a big home game coming up this weekend, but
Yeah.
going to a Michigan game is like unlike anything else. It's the biggest stadium in the country.
Big house.
So being there in the student section with 14,000 people every Saturday is something that's super, super fun and cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely part of our culture here. For
Absolutely.
Sure. Cool. Thanks, you guys. So next question is about interviews. So what was the most surprising interview question that you were asked, and any advice for staying calm on interview day?
Again, pretty fresh out of this process. But something that surprised me was my interviewer was actually an M4. One of my interviewers was a student. And at some point in the interview, she referenced something that I had said in my personal statement, like one line, very powerful line, but one line. And she said, "Can you tell me more about this and what this term, I think it was like cultural humility, and tell me more about what it means to you." And I think that showed me that, she had really gone through my application and like taking the time to get to know me on paper before she saw me in person. And two, that like, she really cared about what was important to me, because obviously it was important to me. It was my personal statement. And we had a really good conversation about it afterwards. And a way to stay calm, I know here at Michigan, Carol and the whole admissions team does such a good job of helping you chill out in the morning. Like literally, like I walked in and I was like kind of nervous, but Carol handed me a fortune cookie, and I opened it and it's like, "We already like you, do your best," and everybody got fortune cookies with motivational quotes in them, and that was really helpful. But obviously, that's not how it's like at every school. But I would say remembering that you're here for a reason. They invited you because they like you on paper. And usually an interview it's two things. It's one, an opportunity for you to get to know the school, and two, like just to prove that you are who you said you are. So if you frame it that way, I think it's a little less scary. So just remembering that you're the school likes you, they want to know you, and just as much as you're trying to sell yourself to that school is trying to sell themselves to you as well. So that helped calm my nerves a bit too. And practice. The more you practice before your interview, the more chill your interview will feel.
Yeah.
And I would say, kind of to piggyback off of that, just remember, like, it's a conversation. More so, it's not like, oh, I have to like say. I would stray away from like creating scripts and things like that, or ways to answer certain questions.
I agree.
Just because it seems more natural if you just if it flows a little better, as opposed to it seeming like, oh, like I'm sticking to this one script, and if it deviates from the script, then I'm kind of like, I'm struggling. But I would say just like be yourself, which I know can sometimes sound a lot easier than it actually is, but just be yourself and just try not to worry about it too much, because at the end of the day, if they invited you there for an interview, they do already like you. So it's just a matter of like you showing them like who you really are and like your true self. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, God.
No, go ahead.
One piece of advice that I've given to a lot of people that I know who've applied to medical school. So I remember one interview that I did, it wasn't the one for Michigan, where I did not feel confident at all. And I feel like confidence is a big part of how naturally you go about an interview. So I went to this interview, like even the way that I did my hair, like it didn't feel like me. And I was so self-conscious the whole time and kind of nervous and stumbled through the whole interview, and I didn't get an offer from that school, and it made sense to me because I did not feel like I was my best self. And so before the Michigan interview, because it was really important to me, I wanted to do well. I was a student athlete too. I played volleyball at Carleton, and we had this exercise at one point where like we wrote a note to each other about the strengths that we see in that person. And so I had a note that was from one of my teammates where she told me all of the positive things that she sees about me and why she looks up to me as like her teammate and her captain. And I read that to myself the night before my interview, because I feel like this whole process is such a challenge to your self-esteem and your image of yourself, because you're just constantly questioning, like, do people like me? Am I selling myself enough? Like, have I done enough? And to have that reminder that you are good and there are these wonderful things about you, and what things you need to emphasize when you're at your interview day, like that will help you be your most confident and best self.
That's great. Thanks, you guys. I always recommend to others just to be organic and authentic when you're there. And I think Michigan does a great job of making you feel comfortable when you come in. At least that was my experience when I interviewed. So thank you all. All right, this next question is about the MSCP program. So I will go ahead and take this. I'm the one representative here tonight. So the question is, what did you choose to do your MSCP program in at Michigan, and how has your experience been thus far? So I'm in the molecular and integrated. My PhD department is in molecular and integrated physiology. I study a cardiac disease called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and I've actually gotten to work in both on a randomized clinical trial, both with human patients. I did that during my first couple of years of med school, and then I've taken that idea that we've learned in the clinic and reverse translated that into mouse models in a basic science research lab. So it's been really rewarding to be able to work in both of those areas of medicine, both on a human patient side, and then begin to answer mechanistic biological questions at a bench and doing research. The program is great. The leadership is fantastic. I think what Michigan tells the prospective applicants is that the program leadership, Dr. Koenig, is that every student in the MSCP program gets lots of attention, and that's so true. We have great support in our program, and I feel lucky because everybody in the leadership of the MSCP knows who you are, and they're always kind of looking out for you. So that's been quite special, and my experience has been great. The program has been going for 30 years. The medical scientist training program aspect means that it's an MD-PhD program funded by the National Institutes of Health. There's about 30 schools or so in the nation that have that grant mechanism, and so that makes our funding very secure and further research opportunities really good. So it's a very strong program. So I'm happy, and it's going along. It takes a little while, but it's good. So yeah. The next question is about some support and community. What sort of resources or support are available for underrepresented medical students at University of Michigan?
So I would say for that one, there's an office here. It's called OHE. It's like the Office of Health, Equity, and Inclusion. This office makes themselves readily available to any student, not necessarily underrepresented, but it's just available to any student. Their doors are wide open all the time, and they're just, if you have any questions, concerns, or anything, typically I would say that they're likely to be your first go-to, or even if you're just interested in other things outside of support. But if you're I'm really interested in this one particular aspect of medicine that I can't really find anyone else who's doing, that would be more so I would say the go-to office for that. They're also willing to also I just feel in general the admissions or the OMSC, the administration committee, is very receptive of students just coming to them with any concerns, and then they can also kind of point you in the right direction if they themselves can't in particular help you. So
Great.
Yeah, and in terms of student groups on campus, there are a lot of identity-based groups. So there's United Asian American Association of Medical Students. There's GEMS, the Jewish Student Association, Middle Eastern American Student Association, LANAMA, Latin American, Native American Association. And so there are all of these groups that you can join, but there's also a Student Diversity Council where there's a representative from each of those groups that kind of meet together and also have a close relationship now with Student Council. And so that's another way of kind of joining a group that represents a cultural or community that you identify with or want to support. And also the Student Diversity Council is a great way that within our school that those groups talk with one another.
Yeah. So that's a nice segue, Sam. So the next question that's coming up is about community, and what I like to ask you is what other student orgs are you involved in, if you've joined any yet, and how do you have the time or make the time to participate in these student organizations?
So when it comes to student orgs, I think it's one of those things where you kind of find the things that are important to you, and then you kind of make time for things that are important. Because at the end of the day, yes, studying is really important, but being yourself and being true to yourself and also doing things that are important to you are kind of just equally as important as studying. So for me, I'm in the Black Medical Association, and I'm on the executive board for that. And it was just one of those things. It's like, okay, like I'm gonna sacrifice like an hour of studying this day to go to this meeting, and I'll just kind of make it up like somewhere else. So you kind of just like rearrange your schedule. And that's another good thing about like kind of just jumping back to an earlier question, like the curriculum is very like flexible when it comes to kind of like your scheduling as well as your timing and your testing. So you're kind of on your own schedule, and they put a lot of responsibility on you for that. So for me, I could say like, okay, I'm just gonna push off studying for an hour here, and I'm gonna make that up like a little later in the day, but I'm gonna go and do this meeting. But another program that I'm in is called Doctors of Tomorrow. And well, I was in that, I guess my M1 year, I guess I'm not anymore. But with that program, it's kind of like an outreach program to high schoolers and I would say 9th through 12th graders or 9th through 11th graders. And it's kind of a mentoring program for students who might be interested in pre-health and things like that. So those were a couple of the programs that the student orgs that I'm in. I'm in a lot of other ones, but those were the two big ones that I was in.
I think something just about med school in general too is I feel like a lot of pre-meds are really worried about building up a resume and checking off some boxes as far as research, as far as community service, as far as clinical time. But what's really nice about med school is I feel like the people that are involved in extracurriculars are involved in things that they're truly passionate about. They're not really trying to build a resume necessarily for residency. So the things that they put their time into, they're really passionate about, and they really kind of delve their whole selves into those things. So I guess a couple things I was involved in is I volunteered at both the Student Run Free Clinic and the Delanis Center this past year. So two free healthcare organizations. So the Student Run Health Clinic, the Student Run Free Clinic is run by Michigan med students from kind of top to bottom. And we go in either Wednesdays or Saturdays to a little town called Pinckney, about 45 minutes away, and give free healthcare to the uninsured there. And the Delanis Center is a homeless shelter in Ann Arbor where we have opportunities, I think typically on Mondays, to go in and provide free healthcare and see people of Ann Arbor. So those have been really, really cool too. I'm also a member of the Christian Medical Association, and then we actually are starting up and kind of rejuvenating a Michigan Catholic group as well, which I've been a part of as well.
Awesome.
In terms of there was a question about self-care earlier that you answered, but for me, and we're gonna eventually get into like why we picked Michigan later, and I'll come back to this, but like being in student orgs is like the way that I take care of myself. Like it's how I choose to spend my free time, and it's the way that I get to meet people from other classes, do something creative, and just spend like an hour each week doing something that isn't school related. And for me, I really need that to like stay a sane person because I just like doing a lot of different things. So in addition to the musical that I'm helping run, I'm also one of the directors for Biorhythms this year. So that is the student dance group that we have. We have 2 showcases a year. We have all sorts of dances that are in it, and it's just like an incredible time. You get to see your friends up on stage like doing some sick moves, and it's like one of the best things about med school here, and like we are the only med school that has that, and that was very important to me when I was choosing where to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the Smoker and Biorhythms is always sought out.
You should sign up for that.
It's a lot of fun.
Not biased.
Cool, thanks you guys. All right, so next question about global opportunities, if anybody has any familiarity. How do the global health tracks concentrations work? And does your school help students with international rotations, especially if they're not in the global health path of excellence?
I know I'm still in M1, I'm like barely 2 months in, but I did talk to upperclassmen before I came to Michigan, and also part of why I chose Michigan is that I have these upperclassmen. But I know people who have done international experiences abroad, maybe as an elective or as a research project, and it was not part of a path of excellence, so that caters to that part of the question, that it's definitely possible. And you are not limited by your path in terms of like the opportunities when you are in the branches. So you can definitely do that, I know.
Yeah, so I'm an old geezer, and the curriculum has changed even since I was an M1. But my M1 summer, I did the Global Reach program, which is there are specific organizations in different countries that Michigan Medicine partners with and has these like global health initiatives. And so I went to Beijing for 7 weeks when I was an M1, and I did hepatology research there. And so there is a kind of infrastructure for participating in global research opportunities if that is something that you're interested in. I don't know if it'll necessarily happen during your M1 summer anymore, but in the branches, your M3 and M4 time, so electives are like you sign up for things that you want to do. You have to meet like certain requirements in order to graduate, but you generally have the flexibility to like pick whatever rotations you want. I know people who have gone and like they found like a language program in Peru and did that for like 4 weeks because they just wanted to work on their Spanish and like live in Peru for 4 weeks, which is awesome. And you also have the ability to just sign up for research experiences and individually arranged electives that you can design. You can sign up for international electives. So I know people who did a general surgery rotation in Brazil. I really think they just wanted to go to Brazil. Maybe they wanted to do the surgery, but there are a whole bunch of opportunities to explore things internationally if that's something that you're interested in.
Yeah, 2 of my classmates, one of them went to Austria, one of them went to Switzerland, and one went into otolaryngology, and the other is going to general surgery. So there's lots of opportunities to go abroad and places, so pretty neat if you get to go do those things.
Yeah, that's cool.
I was jealous.
I know.
Cool, so we're moving on. Mentors and research is the kind of next topic we'll talk about. Is it possible to do research during the first and second years of med school? And what kinds of opportunities are available? Are professors readily accessible to students as both professional and research mentors?
I could talk a little bit about this. So I'm not doing research yet. I'm trying to get my feet wet a little bit before I get into research, but a lot of my classmates have found projects, and the professors are actually really open about joining their labs. I think I can count like 10 lectures I've had already where the professor will leave their email address at the end and tell the students, by the way, I'm working on this really cool stem cell research project, and if you're interested, email me, join my lab. And maybe the first month of school was just swamped with emails about research opportunities that you did have to apply for, but you know, they really have been encouraging M1s to take on research if they want to. By no means do you have to do research because there's so much time in the branches. And what that looks like, I think, is anywhere from 5 to 10 hours per week. So it's not, I would say it's not as time consuming as maybe it was in undergrad. So it's definitely doable during the year if you want it to be, but it's not a requirement. So I can attest to that.
Cool.
And I'll kind of speak on it from the other end. So I just signed up through a mentor to join his research project, so I'll be doing that more so in the branches. Granted, looking back, I do feel like I did have the time M1 year to do so if I wanted to. Probably not as much as I'll be able to invest over the next like couple years or during my M3 and M4 year. But I would say, like, in regards to second year, a lot of your focus is kind of on working and studying. With that being said, my roommate wants to go into a very competitive specialty, so she's like working on 3 research projects right now. And I'm like, I have absolutely no time to do that. But we're the same year, so she's like, you kind of find time to do the things that you want to do and the things that are important to you again. But I think throughout the second year, which are your clinical rotations, there are certain months where you're really busy, and then there's other months where you're like not as busy. So in those months, you might invest more time in doing the research. You don't have to study as hard because the rotations are a little easier. So I think like it definitely is possible. It's just a matter of, again, kind of rearranging your time and focusing on certain things at different times. So.
Cool. I think speaking to finding mentors here, I think it's really, really easy. I think the vast majority of faculty here love working with medical students in whatever way possible. So for example, I went to a random student interest group and met one of the physicians there, kind of connected with her on that like dinner night. Ended up meeting with her in her office for an hour and a half, talking about my life, her path in the field, and then ended up just becoming part of her research team and adding a clinical research project in like April or March without really thinking about doing that going into that meeting. So if you want those opportunities, they're definitely there, and the opportunities to interact and find mentors is extremely easy, which I think was a huge thing of why I ended up coming to Michigan as well.
Very Cool. Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that I think there's lots of different types of research you can do. So you mentioned clinical research. I do basic science research. There's policy research, public health types of research. So there's tons of different research opportunities. So I think that's a nice thing as well. We have a lot of different graduate schools at Michigan. So we have a lot of opportunity in different departments, not only in the medical school. So I think that's another strength of ours as well.
And one other great thing I would say about Michigan in particular is, like, if you're interested in something, like, even if it's very specific, if you talk to someone and they don't necessarily, or if you talk to a faculty member and they don't necessarily have that connection that you're looking for, they will point you in the direction of the person who can help you best. And, like, even if that's kind of like pointing you to different people a couple times, at the end of the day, they will make sure that you kind of find who you need to talk to do whatever you want to do. So.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, y'all. Yeah. Okay, moving on, we're going to talk about paths of excellence. Who is in a path and which one and why? And how much time and guidance did you receive in choosing your path of excellence? Anybody want to take that question?
Sure.
If they're in a path of excellence? Yeah.
Sure.
Gary,
So
yeah,
I was in the Scholarship of Learning and Teaching path of excellence. I think as far as how much introduction we had into the paths, there were a couple of different weeks where we had info sessions with a whole bunch of different paths that we are potentially interested in. They kind of hosted like a 30-minute info session telling us kind of what the expectations were in the path, what kind of projects people could end up doing for their impact project throughout the rest of the time in the curriculum, and kind of the things that they would be covering. And as far as why I chose the Scholarship of Learning and Teaching, I was really involved in admissions and interview days and the second look weekend for this past year. And I think being involved in something like admissions or some kind of medical education is something that I would love to do down the road. So that kind of seemed to be a really good fit for me. But I have friends who are in all kinds of different paths, whether it's the innovation path of excellence, the ethics path of excellence, global health and disparities. There's kind of countless opportunities and different areas of focus if you have any particular interest outside of specifically clinical medicine.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm on the medical humanities path, and like this is my spiel about the path. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. It's not required. Like that didn't change,
No.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I'll say is that this isn't a required thing. This is something that you opt into if you're interested in. And my spiel about it is like the paths of excellence are a way for you to make the curriculum and med school resources work for you in something that you're passionate about and a project that you potentially want to work on. So for me, I really wanted to write a play, and I knew that on the medical humanities path, like I would have the resources and the opportunity and the time to be able to do that like in the med school curriculum. And so it's something that's like not necessarily that like maybe I wouldn't have built-in time into the branches to be able to do, but because I did the path, I could have that. And so don't worry about it. It's not like something that you have to do. It's purely like if there's something that you're interested in, like ethics or innovation or global health or a scholarship in teaching, like go and do that. Like the school is going to support you in your interests that kind of complement your academic work.
Cool. And a sub-question that was asked is, can you combine two paths? And I think two paths is not recommended due to time, but it sounds like you can kind of customize your path accordingly, and that's kind of what I gathered from Kevin and Sam. Cool. All right, you guys, curriculum. How do you feel Michigan prepares you to address upstream health factors for your patients and beyond? So how do you feel prepared in addressing health factors for your patients and beyond? So this might be for clinical students that have gone through.
I think a lot of different medical school curriculums are starting to incorporate more health system science and kind of a broader view of healthcare into what they teach medical students. And I think peppered throughout M1 through M4 year, we have programming that relates to that. I have always felt like here at Michigan, we always kind of talk about like the bigger picture, what are things that are impacting our patients beyond what we immediately see in clinic or in the hospital, and what are things that we can do to be more cognizant of those factors when we're trying to treat these patients as like whole persons. I hope I'm interpreting this question correctly.
Yeah, I think you are,
Because this is going to be really embarrassing if I'm not. but yeah, we had like a health system science lecture, and I remember they gave us this analogy of, kind of a morbid analogy, but it's like you're sitting having a picnic by a river and you're seeing these bodies floating down the river. And so what they're trying to teach us, or at least a lot of medical schools are trying to do, they're trying to teach you to not just like pull the bodies out of the river one by one, but kind of go upstream and figure out who's pushing those bodies in. And so I think Michigan has always had an eye to helping students see the bigger picture, and we're not just locked into basic science or like clinical medicine, but thinking more broadly.
I'll also kind of tie into that and say that Michigan's very like team-based in general when it comes to healthcare. So it's like on one team you'll have like social workers, pharmacists, like medical students, residents, interns, and kind of through all of that, that kind of helps maintain the holistic picture of the patient. So it's like even if you're like kind of talking about this patient and trying to figure out like what you're going to do, how you're going to help this patient, there's a social worker who's also like looking at that patient like from a different perspective that maybe like someone else was missing. So then they could give their input, and then you're like, oh, like actually I didn't think of things that way. So it's very like patient centered, but it's like through the eyes, through multiple different like perspectives and multiple different lenses.
Thanks, Dennis. Okay. Next question has to do with community engagement. Kevin talked a little bit about this earlier with the Delanis Clinic, the free clinic, but how does the University of Michigan Medicine engage with their surrounding communities? And I think you gave a couple good examples. You could bring those back up, Kevin, if you wanted to. But
absolutely. So there's a number of different organizations and extracurriculars that you can get involved in. So the two I mentioned before, the Student Run Free Clinic, which is something that I think is really, really special about Michigan and a ton of students get involved in, whether that's like in a big leadership role and kind of running those clinic days, or me as just like a volunteer every so often in the clinic. Just getting out in the community and seeing kind of the patients as a first-year medical student who's not in the clinical curriculum yet was really, really valuable. And I think the same can be said for the Delanis Center, specifically working with the homeless population in Ann Arbor. There's also, I think, a somewhat new group that does street medicine in both Ann Arbor and Detroit. So they go around in vans and see if people need healthcare right there on the street. And we go through a training program to help out with those kind of people as well. So those are just a couple of the ways that people have started to get involved. But I think I'm sure there's more that I don't even know of, and if there are specific populations around Ann Arbor or Detroit, I think that's a huge focus of Michigan as well. And so if you have any great ideas as to how to further get involved too, it's something that's definitely at your disposal to do.
The medical school is also super involved in fundraising for the community. So the Galen's Medical Society is like one of our largest student organizations, and we have a fundraiser every year called Tac Days, and where it's like the med students go out in the streets of Ann Arbor. Like this is a tradition. Like everybody knows when it's Tac Days, and we raise like tens of thousands of dollars for children in Washtenaw County, and we choose as an organization each year what charities and like funds and groups we want to give the money to, and it's a very a process that a lot of people put a lot of time and effort and energy into because we want to find a way to give back to the community. And so that's something that I've been involved in, and like Tac Days is a huge tradition for all of us. Biorhythms too donates its money to local charities that supports healthcare for vulnerable populations, but there are other ways to be engaged with the community in addition to clinically.
yeah, getting lots of plugs in for biorhythms.
Yeah, man, that's what I'm here for.
Maybe quickly, Des and Sam, so I know you guys have been through your clinical clerkship training. Maybe you could tell prospective students about the opportunities that you could train, like do a clerkship somewhere outside of Ann Arbor if you wanted to, right, for family medicine or et cetera. Do you want to talk a little bit about that quickly?
Yeah, so I actually, for family medicine, I was at a non-Michigan affiliated clinic. I was in Livonia.
Okay.
And
which is just east of Ann Arbor.
yeah, it's just east of Ann Arbor. It's like a suburb of Detroit. And that was a really fascinating experience because I did see a slightly different patient population, and I got to see how providers work in a system that isn't a Michigan system.
Yeah.
And so that was a really nice experience. And I know on the neurology clerkship too, I think you could go to a clinic that's in Jackson, which is like 45 minutes west of here. Yeah.
Cool.
And also, I will say for family medicine, there's different sites. There's like sites in Ypsilanti, which is kind of just slightly
South of here?
Yeah.
Southeast, yeah.
so it's south of here. There's also sites in rural locations. There's sites in like Ohio, which, but there are multiple different sites. And Michigan's willing to work with you. They allow you to kind of rank where you want to go, and you can explain like why you want to go there. So if you really want to do like rural medicine, you can say like, oh, I'm really interested in this specific site that's on your list of places that I can go because like I think I want to do rural medicine when I grow up and become a doctor.
Yeah.
So they are flexible with that, and there's also kind of different populations that they kind of try to target for people who are interested in those particular populations.
Yeah. And I think that that's a great segue, Des. It's kind of a related question. Do you find there is sufficient patient diversity at Michigan for you to have adequate training during your clinical years? And that might be things like ethnicity, race, socioeconomic level, and pathology, or presentation of certain rare cases. So
yeah, I definitely think there is, and kind of tying into what I was just saying, I think it's also very easy, or a lot easier here than it might be at other schools, to kind of get those opportunities and say like, oh, I'm really interested in this. Like, is it okay if as a clinical student, I go to this location to kind of like further my education and to kind of like get the most out of this experience for me? So Michigan has been, I think, pretty receptive to that feedback, at least like this past year as I've gone through.
In terms of patient population, so Ann Arbor does have a very specific population that you're treating. A lot of like local people are going to be like slightly wealthier, like a little bit more of the same socioeconomic status and kind of ethnicity that you'll see, but Michigan is like a level 1 trauma center, and we are a hospital that all of the hospitals in Michigan, literally all of the hospitals in Michigan, will send their most complicated and interesting and rare cases to, because we just have the resources and the expertise to be able to handle them. So you will see really interesting things that you won't get to see at another type of teaching hospital. That being said, because Ann Arbor has a very specific patient population, you actually do have so many opportunities to go to other hospitals in the area. So you can go to St. Joe's for a few different clerkships, which is a community hospital, and you'll get a certain type of patient population there. I was in Ypsilanti at the clinic for my pediatric clerkship, and that is a lot of Medicaid patients and a very different kind of type of patient population than you see in Ann Arbor. I also did an emergency medicine rotation at Hurley and Flint, and that was like an incredible rotation. Very different place, very different environment, but I learned a lot. You also can go to Henry Ford, and when you are a branches student and you are applying to residency, some specialties require that you do an away rotation, or you can just do it for fun, but you can go to other states and other institutions to see what it's like to practice medicine there too.
I'm going to pick on you again, Sam,
Oh, cool.
because this question is for, and you, Des. Sorry, I'm not neglecting you. We'll come back soon. So for you all, how well prepared do you feel for matching and residency in general? This is maybe more pertinent for you.
She just
Sam.
applied.
You like can't ask me that because I just submitted my application. Obviously, I'm scared out of my mind. No, I think I would say I'm like pretty confident in my clinical skill. That sounds really bold to say that. I don't know. I know.
Yeah, that's good.
I feel pretty confident. Like once you get to starting to do your sub-internships, so when you're like an M3, M4, a sub-internship, so an intern is the first year of residency, and a sub-intern is like a med student that's trying to practice being an intern. And so when you start doing your rotations where you're doing a sub-internship, it's like everything kind of comes together, and you realize that you are competent and capable of handling things with supervision. And so I think I'm pretty well prepared for residency. That remains to be seen. But we also, like, the different departments here are so supportive for all of the students. Like, I've met with so many different, I'm applying in emergency medicine, and I have met with so many different faculty and mentors that have helped me with my application process and have been like truly very honest with me about what programs make sense for me, where I kind of sit relative to other candidates, and the things that I need to emphasize on my application and what I need to do when I'm interviewing. And so I feel extremely well supported. I feel like it's too much hubris to say whether or not I'm like gonna do really well in residency, but I'm not scared. And they do a boot camp right before, so at the end of your M4 year, you have a boot camp for all of the different specialties, which is like 1 month or 2 months of just dedicated, like high yield, what you need to know your first day of intern year information. And I know a lot of upperclassmen who, after having gone through that, feel so much more confident in kind of going to whatever program that they get matched into. So I have like no concerns that I will be able to like not kill anybody when I start my residency.
Thanks, Sam. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thanks for sharing. Because it's so proximal to what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
Des, do you have any thoughts on that, given that you just finished your clinical rotations?
Um,
Or you're finishing, you're almost done?
Yeah, so I won't be applying, I have another year before I apply. But I think just kind of overall, the clinical, getting the exposure earlier will be super beneficial and help me out. But also kind of the branches in general, the fact that I have essentially like 18 months of flexibility where I'm just like, oh, like I can do whatever I want in these 18 months as long as I like fulfill like 6 months of requirements. I think that's also going to help me a lot because I'm someone who I'm pretty convinced I know what I want to go into. So when we just finished scheduling the first 6 months, like come from like December to June of next year. So I've like lined up specifically. I'm like, okay, I want to do this month. I want to take this. This month I want to take this, and it's kind of like is prepping me and getting me ready for like my application as well as like what I'm going to be doing like for the rest of my life. Like so, I think, granted, I haven't done it or gone through it yet, like you have, but I think kind of having so much flexibility to create my own schedule. We're not like scrambling at the end like a couple months before applying. I think that's going to be huge and super beneficial when I go to apply as well as like when I become a resident. So
Cool. Thanks, Des. All right, I'm going to throw a question your all's way. What is M-Home and how do you think about it? And what is it like also learning in small groups? And how has that impacted both of those things, M-Home and small groups, how has that impacted your learning and development?
I guess I can tackle the small groups question.
Yeah.
So I come from a really small liberal arts college where class sizes were about 10 to 12 on the high end. So I absolutely love that kind of learning environment. And while the lectures aren't all like that, there's very specific dedicated small group time every week. In one case of that is in your doctoring groups, which is a group of like 10 or 12 of your classmates matched with 2 faculty, kind of teaching clinical skills, teaching different health disparity lessons, kind of ranging the full gamut of what you may see as a clinical student. In addition, there's also various small groups throughout the week and throughout the sequences that will like support and add to all of the lectures supplementally. And for those either like residents or fellows or attendings will all kind of come and lead those smaller presentations. So we've had a ton of those recently in our transition clerkships as we are about to start our clinical rotations. And those are so great to kind of be able to pick the ear of some of the leaders of the field that are all around the University of Michigan, and to not really feel dumb asking questions that you may perceive to be kind of silly questions. But just being in that smaller learning environment, having the ability to have those kind of small, intimate discussions, I think was a great thing for our learning and the development of our foundational clinical knowledge.
I can talk a little bit about M-Home.
Great,
but
thanks.
So M-Home is, I guess the best way I can describe it is it's like Harry Potter, where you get sorted into one of 4 houses, and you get sorted during your orientation week. So right off the bat, I was told I was House Sanford. Go Sanford!
Yes.
Yes. And I guess what M-Home has done for me is like it takes this huge group of 170 students and divides them into 4. So being in that smaller group, it does make it easier to get to know people. And each group is assigned, I think you get like a physician faculty member who's like a coach. So if you have any questions like related to being a doctor, you have that person to coach you and ask them questions. But I think what's been most impactful is my house counselor, Amy. I think anytime if I'm stressed out during the week or I need help navigating some aspect of the curriculum, but I don't really want to ask a faculty member or someone who might judge me or have, I don't know, just sometimes it can be daunting to be asking someone like a doctor. So Amy is our counselor, and I can go to her for anything pertaining to curriculum, pertaining to wellness, pertaining to student orgs. So I think that has been one of the best things about M-Home for me. And it's just like a great way to build community. We just had the M-Home Olympics. super competitive. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left, Yoel. We're going to have our closing question here, and we're all going to answer it, and I think it's important we do. So how did you know that Michigan Medical School was a right fit for you? And now that you're here, what is different about Michigan that makes it such a unique experience? Excuse me. I'll start by saying I knew it was a right fit because of the people. When I came here and I had the interactions with people here, it felt very welcoming. It was a collaborative community. People are happy. People are healthy. It's just a great place to be, and it's a great place to be personally and professionally. Like Michigan is like we have this great community, but we're also very excellent. So we really push hard in what we want to do. And so I'm super happy to be here for that reason. And it started from the interview process, and it's been that same way since I've been in school, both in medical school and both in graduate school for my PhD.
Right. I think one thing to add to that too, I think that's absolutely the answer I would give too, is the community of people that I'm surrounded by. But one thing I love to say to friends who ask me about med school or friends who are going and applying in, just ask about what a Michigan student looks like. I think the one word that it kind of boils down to is passionate. I think so many of our classmates are so passionate about so many different things, whether that's some aspect of clinical medicine, whether that's something about research, whether that's something about public policy, or something completely outside, and exercise. I think it's so great to be privy to so many different points of view and perspectives, and just learning how passionate everyone is about something and taking a little bit of that and enriching your own kind of education through your classmates is, I think, something that makes this place so special.
Yeah, it's infectious in that way, that passion.
Absolutely.
You all, what do you think?
Well, so again, I think I was going to kind of say the same thing. Just the feeling that I got on interview day, of all of the places that I interviewed, no place made me feel kind of like Michigan did. Like I left Michigan, like my interview day, and I was like, I'm going to Michigan. And then I was like,
oh
wait, I kind of got to get in first. But it was just kind of they were very welcoming, they were very warm. They kind of convinced me that I wanted to go to Michigan before I even got into Michigan. But other than that, I would say that I knew a lot of the medical students here before even starting or before applying, just kind of through undergrads and just other career jobs that I was doing. But just through communicating with them and hearing their aspect of things, medical school is very hard. It's at the end of the day, regardless of where you go, med school is going to be hard. And I think the important thing is making sure you're going to a school with people that will support you. And I don't necessarily just mean the faculty or the administration, but also your classmates, your peers. It's everyone here seemed very friendly. They were all very warm and welcoming students. And that was something that was really important to me as well, because I didn't want to go somewhere where medical school, I was med school is hard enough without the aspect of competition. So that was something, and the fact that Michigan was pass-fail curriculum was also huge, because I was at least that takes one level of stress off of things. I was okay, as long as I pass, then I'm okay. And the rest of things will just kind of fall together, fall into place over time.
Thanks, Des.
So.
I picked Michigan because at all of the other schools that I interviewed at, which wasn't many, but the extracurriculars that I had were the internal medicine interest group, and that was it. But then here we have all of these different things. I won't say them again, but you know the orgs that I'm a part of. But there's also so many other things that you can participate in outside of school, and that was so important to me. And I mean, I would echo everything that everybody has already said, but med school is very hard, but it can be fun, and Michigan was a place where I knew I could have fun, and I have continued to have fun for the past 4 years.
And tying into that, I will also say that if there's something you are interested in doing that doesn't exist here at Michigan, they are extremely open to you starting your own interest group, or you can literally do whatever you want. You can start a new organization, and just you can find people to help fund that organization, and you can get people to join it. So that was something that I've never even heard of at other places. It's I'm really interested in this one tiny aspect of something that no one else has probably heard of. I'm going to start my own group for it. And Michigan will actually support you in doing that, which I thought was just amazing.
So. Yeah, I guess that ties into why I picked Michigan, was because I felt that whatever it is that was important to me, or that I, wanted at some aspect of my career, for example, the Arab community is very important to me. I'm from Dearborn. and that's a big population there. And I knew that there were upperclassmen. I had also known a lot of upperclassmen who went to Michigan and talked to them, but that population meant a lot to them too, and so they started like the Arab American Health Initiative, and I'm like, oh my God, they just started this thing from the ground up, and now all these students are involved, and they'll go do work with like a free clinic in Dearborn to get more hands-on experience with that community, and that's something that I want to do in the future. So the fact that that already existed here and that one day I can be a part of that and help that grow was a big aspect for me, and knowing that in the future if there's anything I cared about or wanted to start, that I had the resources and the support to do that. And echoing, I guess, what a lot of people said is the people, the support here, the classmates are very collaborative. Pass-fail helps make it that we're not competing. And that is huge, I think, for wellness. So definitely those aspects.
Okay, great, y'all. We're going to close now. Thanks so much for answering those questions. Thank you, everybody, for watching. You can watch this again on Michigan Medicine's YouTube channel. I wish you all a good night, and go blue.
Go blue.
Blue.